I was talking to my neighbor. Guy's been growing tomatoes for 35 years. Retired postal worker, grows them in raised beds along his back fence. Last summer he showed me his plants and I genuinely couldn't believe what I was looking at. These things were enormous, like embarrassingly big compared to mine. I asked him what fertilizer he was using. He laughed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a little orange bottle of regular aspirin, the kind you get at CVS for $2. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. Here's the thing though, and this is what got me. When I started actually digging into why aspirin works on tomatoes, I found something that made me genuinely angry. Because the science on this isn't new. University of Rhode Island researchers published work on it in 2006. Plant scientists had been documenting it since the 1990s. And the mechanism, the actual reason it works, has been understood for decades. So why has nobody at your local garden center ever mentioned it? Why isn't it on the label of any tomato fertilizer you've ever bought? I'll tell you why in about 2 minutes, and once I do, you're going to look at your summer growing season very differently. But first I need to tell you what aspirin actually does inside a tomato plant, because it's not what you think. Most people assume the point of treating plants is to feed them. Give them nitrogen, give them phosphorus, hit them with calcium. You're basically doing the plant's grocery shopping for it. That's what the whole fertilizer industry is built on. Bags of NPK ratios, soil amendments, foliar sprays. All of it operates on the same assumption. Your plants are hungry, so feed them. But aspirin doesn't feed your tomato plant anything. What it does is trigger a completely different system, one the plant already has, that's just sitting there dormant until it gets the right signal. The active ingredient in aspirin is salicylic acid, and salicylic acid is actually something tomato plants produce themselves, naturally when they're under attack. When an insect starts chewing on a leaf, or when a fungal infection starts spreading through the root zone, the plant starts producing salicylates, its own version of this compound, and that triggers what researchers call systemic acquired resistance. The whole plant essentially goes into a defensive posture. It beefs up cell walls, produces compounds that fight off pathogens, and diverts more energy into reproduction, which in a tomato means more fruit. The problem is, your tomato sitting quietly in a garden bed with no insects attacking it and no stress on the roots, it never triggers that system. It just grows at whatever baseline pace it's comfortable with. When you water it with a diluted aspirin solution, you're essentially sending a false alarm. You're telling the plant, you're under attack, without actually damaging it. And the plant responds by doing everything it would do if a real threat existed, including producing more fruit. Dr. Richard Hammerschmidt at Michigan State published extensively on SAR in the 1990s, and his work was pretty clear. Salicylic acid doesn't just defend plants, it changes how they allocate resources. More energy toward reproduction, more tomatoes. The dilution matters here, and I want to be exact about it. One regular 325 milligram aspirin tablet dissolved in 1 gallon of water. That's it. You apply it as a foliar spray, meaning you spray it directly on the leaves, once every 2 to 3 weeks from transplant through mid-season. Don't do it more than that. More is not better here. You're triggering a stress response, and over-triggering it actually backfires. This is where most people who've heard a version of this get it wrong. They dump extra aspirin in, because they figure if a little works, more works better. That's the logic that garden centers would love for you to use with their fertilizers, by the way. But with this, the dose is the whole game. 1 tablet, 1 gallon, every 2 to 3 weeks. Let me say something that nobody on a gardening TV show will say out loud. The garden center business model requires you to keep coming back. They need you to run out of something. You can't run out of aspirin. You already have it. It costs almost nothing, and 1 bottle lasts an entire growing season for multiple plants. There's no margin in that for anyone. A 325 milligram bottle of aspirin, 100 tablets, runs about $2 at any pharmacy. That's 100 gallons of spray solution. You have maybe 4 to 6 tomato plants. You will never finish that bottle on tomatoes, which means the value proposition for a garden center to educate you on this is literally zero. Compare that to a bottle of tomato fertilizer. $14 to $22, used up in 6 to 8 weeks, repeat all summer. That's a business. Aspirin isn't a business, it's a solution. Now, I'm not saying there's some coordinated conspiracy where fertilizer executives met in a room and decided to suppress aspirin research. That's not how it works. What actually happens is quieter and more boring than that. The information exists, it's been peer-reviewed, it's on university extension websites if you know to look. But nobody has any financial incentive to bring it to your attention, so it just sits there. University of Rhode Island plant pathologist Dr. Janice Ukita has talked about SAR and salicylate applications in vegetable crops going back to the early 2000s. The research is real. It just never got a marketing budget. There's also a secondary effect I want to mention because it surprised me when I read about it. Aspirin-treated tomato plants show measurably better resistance to common foliar diseases, early blight, septoria leaf spot, even some resistance to tobacco mosaic virus. This is that SAR system again. Once it's activated, it's working across the board, not just triggering more fruit. Your plants get both more productive and harder to kill at the same time. That's a genuinely strange thing for a $2 bottle of aspirin to be doing. But there it is. The mistake I see most often, besides the wrong dosage, is timing. People start too late. You want to begin at transplant, or within the first week of putting your seedlings in the ground. The earlier you start triggering SAR, the more of the growing season the plant spends in that elevated defensive and productive state. By the time most people think about foliar spraying, they're already 6 weeks in, and the window where it makes the biggest difference is behind them. Here's the exact routine. Take 1 regular aspirin, not coated, not buffered, plain aspirin, and drop it into a gallon jug of room temperature water. Let it fully dissolve, which takes about 10 minutes. Shake it. Fill a garden sprayer and apply it in the early morning before temperatures climb above 75 degrees. You want the leaves to dry naturally before noon. Spray the undersides of leaves too. That's where the stomata are, where absorption actually happens. Do that on a Thursday morning every 2 to 3 weeks. Mark it on your calendar. By mid-July, you'll start noticing a difference, and by August, you'll understand why my neighbor was laughing. Now here's where it gets interesting. And I'm going to cover this in the next video because it's worth its own full breakdown. Once you start getting a heavier fruit load, your tomato plant faces a completely new problem. It doesn't have enough calcium getting to the fruit fast enough. That's what causes blossom end rot. That black sunken patch on the bottom of your tomatoes that looks like disease but isn't. It's a transport failure, not a deficiency. And the fix for that is also something you almost certainly already have in your kitchen. If that's showing up in your garden right now, drop a comment below and tell me. And if you've ever tried aspirin on your tomatoes, or heard about this and written it off, I want to know that too. Tell me what happened. The plants are already working. We might as well work with them.